welcome to Season 3 of the United by Coffee podcast, where our mission is to unite the world through coffee. I'm Christy Ross, and with my coffee-curious co-host, Greg Hess here.
Say that 3 times fast. Hey, Christy, how are you?
I'm great, thanks, Greg. I'm so glad you're here with me. So Greg is a successful podcaster, writer, and comedian who is making waves on the West Coast.
That's right. But I'm also branching out, trying to become a student of coffee, and this has really become such a fun thing because I get to hang out and talk about my second favorite thing, which is coffee, and as opposed to my first favorite thing, which is vacation. So if you want to talk about vacation, I'll do that too.
Maybe we'll just record these while you're on vacation, Greg.
That's right. That's right.
So our guest today is kind of in your neck of the woods. How far are you from UC Davis? Like 400,
well,
300, 400
yeah,
miles?
You know how California distances go. It's like the same state, but it is about a 6-hour drive. But I've actually been to Davis many times. I've performed at UC Davis many times over the years, touring, both with, when I was on tour with Second City, I used to go to the Mondavi Center almost every year. It's an amazing place. And what a cool place to go to college.
Today we get to talk to the founder of the first multidisciplinary university research center that is addressing several needs in the coffee industry, as well as challenging the norm. Sort of like marrying coffee science and education and doing so much more. Please welcome Bill Ristenpart, professor of chemical engineering, co-director and founder of the Coffee Lab and Coffee Center at UC Davis. Welcome, Bill. Thanks for coming on the show.
Good morning, Christy. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I understand that your background is not in coffee, but rather in science and chemical engineering. In 2013, you first offered a popular undergraduate elective course called The Design of Coffee as a unique way to teach chemical engineering. And just over a decade later, that first class has now developed into an incredibly innovative and dynamic program, now saddling up next to UC Davis's wine, beer, and tea expertise, which is pretty incredible.
You just gave the whole history. Yeah, absolutely.
And we're done.
I mean, just to put some numbers on that, because I'm an engineer, we started in 2013 with 18 students in a freshman seminar, and this academic year we had 2,091 students go through the undergraduate coffee lab. So it's really grown a lot.
That's
fantastic.
Absolutely incredible.
And Bill, how many years overall have you been with UC Davis?
So it depends on how you count, because I did my undergraduate here back in the dark ages of the 1990s. But I came back and I joined the faculty in 2008.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that you were there and you came back. Like, what drew you back to UC Davis?
Well, many things. You already mentioned one of them. We have amazing colleagues here on campus doing really cool stuff in wine and in beer and in tea and many other food products. And I've always been fascinated by food. And so I'm in chemical engineering, but a lot of my research touches on the complexity of what happens when you're making food. And so one of the draws here was definitely the opportunity to hang out with really smart colleagues, really smart students focused on things I'm passionate about.
Very cool. So you've had quite a run at UC Davis. And recently you topped it off just this month when you opened the brand new 7,000 square foot coffee science research facility. So massive congratulations on that. Well, we're definitely going to talk more about the facility. But first, I want to start off with setting the foundation behind your story. There's curious if there was sort of this particular experience or connection to coffee prior to that first class you created back in 2013.
No, I did my undergraduate in chemical engineering, and then I did my graduate work at Princeton, also in chemical engineering, focusing on something called colloidal particles. And so if your viewers don't know what colloids are, that's the fancy word that just means very small particles. Very small particles. You need a microscope to see them. Very important in many different food products and stuff, and so that was my area of expertise. And my connection to coffee was just that I drank a hell of a lot of it through grad school to get through, and I just used it as a caffeine.
I can relate.
Yeah, me too. I don't know if it helped my academics at all, but I definitely drank a lot of coffee.
I think it's what got me through grad school. But I just drank, cheap coffee, just for caffeine, staying up, pulling a lot of all-nighters in the lab. It wasn't until about 2012 that I kind of had an epiphany for coffee, and I was on a road trip with my family. We were going up to Vancouver in British Columbia. We stopped at this gourmet donut place. My kids were excited about getting some donuts, and there was some coffee there, and I just ordered some black coffee, and I was totally flabbergasted. I was kind of honestly a little bit outraged because this black coffee had huge orange and citrusy notes. And I thought they contaminated my coffee. I thought they threw in some orange peels. I didn't know anything about coffee. And the barista was very patient. He very kindly explained, no, that's just the natural flavor. And that just kind of blew my mind that coffee can have anything other than a kind of a burnt bitter. Okay, so I started thinking about it a bit more. And that was my eye-opening. I still remember very distinctly that cup of coffee because I didn't know anything. That was before the new flavor wheel and all that. And so I started looking into coffee. Then I started realizing, oh my gosh, coffee is a fermented food product. I had no idea. And at this time, I was in the food science graduate group here at UC Davis. And so I was looking for cool things to work on. I thought, maybe there's something cool. I love coffee. Maybe there's something cool about coffee. And right around 2012, my colleague, Professor Tanya Kuhl, who is also a professor of chemical engineering, we were in the hallway of the engineering building having cups of coffee and trying to think about how can we improve the upper division engineering labs for chemical engineering students. And she had this idea. She said, hey, why don't we have the students reverse engineer, take apart a Mr. Coffee drip brewer? And this kind of light bulb went off my head, and I thought, oh my gosh, why don't we make a whole class about coffee and attract students from all over campus? And so that's what we did. We made a freshman seminar where we have the students measure the pH, we have them do mass transfer, we have them measure energy. And the course culminates in a design contest where they have to make the best tasting coffee using the least amount of electrical energy. And so kind of a classic engineering optimization problem, but mapped onto coffee. And so that's my origin story. That's how I got into coffee. It was I drank a lot of it, and then I suddenly, one cup just kind of blew my mind. And then since then, I've been really focused on it.
That's amazing. I mean, I wish I had a class like that as a freshman. I think that's such a fun and interesting way into both engineering and into food science. I mean, that's fantastic.
Absolutely. It's not too late, Greg. We have lots of interesting.
I want to sign up too.
Yeah, I wonder if this religious studies degree and international relations minor will do any good when it comes to brewing a cup of coffee.
I interviewed Jerry Tholman from North Central College, which is a small college here in Illinois. And
I know this guy.
Yeah, and they had built a coffee lab and a coffee business within North Central College. And I was literally thinking, and I said to Jerry, why isn't everybody doing this? And then I come to find what UC Davis is doing. I'm like, I got to interview Bill. But I do want to talk about some of the projects that you've been working on.
Sure.
One of the first ones you published, one of the first studies, was the difference between flat bottom and cone-shaped filters in home coffee makers. For those in the general coffee consumer world, swear to God, we're dying to know what that answer is. So you got to share with us.
Sure. Yeah. So that was actually the first peer-reviewed paper I published that mentioned coffee as a beverage. And so that was part of our first project funded by the Specialty Coffee Association with underwriting from Breville. Breville makes these really nice brewers. And so, and one of the brewers, they had this option where you could have either a flat bottom brewer or you could swap it out with a conical one, right? And as you just alluded to, there are kind of very passionate religious arguments about what shape, brew basket is better for brewing coffee. And so they'd kind of solve that by allowing the consumer to choose either one, but they're also very curious which one's better. And so we did that kind of as a warm-up project. So we did a whole bunch of sensory descriptive work and studied how the geometry, with everything else held constant, so same grind size, same brew ratio, same water temperature, all that. Literally all we changed was geometry, and we saw how that affected the brew. And so if you're asking which one's better, that's a tricky, because some people like this type of coffee and some people like this type of coffee. What is for sure is that when you have the flat bottom basket, what we found was that you get a lower total dissolved solids in the brew, so it's less strong, a weaker brew. And the reason for that is that the path length, as the water goes through the pancake geometry, it has less residence time, what engineers love to call residence time. So, or the contact time, the water and the coffee is lower, and so the brew is weaker. In the conical one, it has a longer path length, and so it comes out stronger. And so our data very unambiguously showed if you hold everything else constant and change that, you're going to change the strength. If you change the strength, you change the flavor.
Got it. That's actually super helpful because you're right. It's subjective of what people like, right?
And I use a conical filter, so now every morning I get to think about the geometry of my filter, which is great. One of the projects, Bill, I think I saw that you were working on coming up was with the newer standards for what color represents in terms of roast level. Is that a project that's intended to clarify color and naming for professionals, or is that for consumers, or both?
Probat supporting that, Coffee Science Foundation is supporting some survey work. And so what we're trying to do is clarify confusion around coffee colors. And so if you go ask 10 roasters, what is a medium roast? How dark is that? You're going to get probably 12 different answers, right? And that's because there's no standards. And very famously, there are some roasters whose light roast, what they label a light roast, is darker than many, especially coffee's dark roasts, right?
I think I may have heard of that place.
Yeah.
Another exciting project that you recently released was the Roast Pick, which you developed, I believe, as a private company. So this is really leveraging like smartphone technology that can greatly reduce the cost of measuring defects in green and roasted coffee, making it more accessible for the roasting community. But I bought one and it is absolutely amazing. And you guys, you were demonstrating it at the expo here in Chicago. Walk us through exactly like what it is and how you expect this to develop over time.
So I had two Q certified computer majors kind of fall out of the sky at the same time. So I thought the coffee gods were speaking to me. And so I put them together on this project just to make a little demo of, can we get size and color distributions of coffee beans with a smartphone just by taking a photo of it. And so that was an idea that had been kicking around my head for a while, because when I first saw it, I forget where, at a dry mill or at an importer somewhere, I saw them using the stacked sieves to shake coffee beans to get the green bean size distribution, because you put it in and then they have smaller and smaller holes, and then you take them out and you weigh each tray. Huge pain. I thought, why don't you just take a photo and just measure them? And they said, well, that'd be great. And so that idea had been kicking around. And so
just talk a little bit about why this advancement matters for the end customer.
Like the overarching goal, like the thing about coffee, is that it's something that a lot of people drink just for pleasure. They like their cup of coffee. It's not something you need for nutrition in terms of bulk calories and things like that. You can talk about antioxidants, things like that. So, anything that you can do to make coffee taste better and more enjoyable by consumers is good. And so if we make quality control cheaper and easier along the entire supply chain, then we're making coffee better along the entire supply chain. We're making it better for the end users.
Well, Bill, you talked about the UC Davis Coffee Center and the grand opening. It just seems like one of the more unique and interesting learning environments, sort of that I've heard about for undergraduates, and definitely around coffee. What are the hopes for the future of the program now that you've opened and reached this big milestone?
I've spent several years fundraising for physical renovations for the building, and it's just because the building's open. And I gave a big speech about this at the opening, and I said that the most state of the art, the most amazing building is totally useless unless you have good people inside of it doing stuff, right? And so what we still need help with from the industry, from forward-thinking companies, from generous individuals who want to support coffee, is we need support for fellowships to support students, because like I mentioned earlier, students are not cheap. Even undergraduate students doing research as research assistants are not cheap. And so we have a little bit of funding, but in some sense right now the Coffee Center is real estate rich and cash poor. So we have an amazing building, but we have not as much student support as we could use. I turn away a lot of students just because we don't have support for them, right? And so that's, if any of your listeners are, want to help, are passionate about helping support coffee science, send me an email. We'll talk to you.
Can you share your view on the coffee industry and how it's sort of developed overall over the past decade?
I mean, I'll start by saying I'm a chemical engineer. I've worked with many different industries. without naming any other ones, also I've worked with a lot of different industries, and coffee by far is the most friendly and enthusiastic and optimistic one. So I love going to coffee expos and things like giving lectures, because there's always so many people passionate to hear about it, and there's people just willing to share knowledge and stuff. And so it's an amazing community to hang out. So like, first of all, the coffee industry is special, and I say that as somebody who came into it from the outside, right? Over the past decade, I think there's been an increasing awareness that coffee has been underserved scientifically and academically, and that we should bring more science and academic research to bear on it. And so when I first started looking up coffee in 2013, I'm a scientist. One of the first things I do is go to Google Scholar or Web of Science and start doing literature review and stuff. And the literature is pretty sparse. And since then, I feel like, and I'm not sure how much of this is survival bias or expectation bias. This is me looking at it, but like, I feel like there's been a ton more groups around the world starting to jump into coffee research. And so, and I'm very proud that UC Davis has, at least in the United States, the very first kind of academic physical infrastructure dedicated to coffee, whole building focused on coffee.
Well, Bill, you've the way I see it, you're one of the leading voices in coffee and such an innovative thinker. And we get to talk to a lot of really interesting people in the world of coffee on this show, but I would want to know how you define your success and what are some of the maybe just larger key things that have helped you along the way, as starting maybe even, was it the chemical engineer side that brought this unique point of view into the space, or what are some of the things that have helped you along the way, just in terms of all these cool things that you've built?
Sure, that's a very broad, very philosophical question.
Yeah,
so
yeah, a kind of a question that you would want to ask sipping coffee. So I'm really curious. Yeah.
Well, okay, so cheers to that.
Yeah.
I guess in the grand scheme of things, so I probably first and foremost should thank my training as a chemical engineer. So something we teach our students is that if you can master chemical engineering, you can master anything, right? Because it's really just a quantitative way about thinking about solving problems. In chemical engineering, we focus on chemicals and chemistry and things like that, but it's really, that's what engineering is. It's problem solving. And so that's bringing kind of that quantitative mindset to tackle this or that or the other thing. And I've, my colleagues and I have chosen to, shine that intellectual firepower on coffee specifically.
Yeah.
And so that's, I guess, the first thing I should think. The bigger thing, though, is like, and I really, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I really have to emphasize this. It doesn't matter how passionate I am or my colleagues are. We can jump up and down and yell until we're hoarse, until we lose our voices about how we need a coffee center. It would not have happened without the support of the industry and without donations from the industry, right? Because the university, not only does the university have a lot of red tape, it's also chronically broke. So there's not a lot of money, to shine a few $1 million on a coffee center just because some faculty are interested in it. So without the support of the industry, without them stepping up and making things happen, we wouldn't be here having this conversation.
But if there was one thing you could change in the coffee industry today, what would it be?
If you limit me to one thing, I guess I would say that there's a lot of strong opinions out there based on zero scientific data. A lot of people stand up with very deep authoritative voices and say things that are just, not true, and not. But so there's a lot of emphasis on received wisdom and received opinions.
Oh yeah. Well, I want to appeal to your quantitative side for a second, Bill. This is our little lightning round here at the end. Okay. So, if you can share a general coffee industry stat that you find interesting, or maybe something from your research that leaps out to you, maybe a number or a stat. Is there one?
Sure, 50%.
Okay, so, of what?
50% of coffee fruit mass is discarded as pulp. Okay. The word for it is discarded. So if you want to improve the lives of farmers around the world, and this is actually a project that's been ongoing at the Coffee Center. Sorry, I'm going to start lecturing. It's not lightning round, but just explain what I'm talking about. I mean, you put years and years of work into growing coffee trees. People pick each cherry by hand, very laborious. What's the first thing they do? They scrape off literally half the mass, 50% of the mass. And then the fruit goes off this way, and it just sits in this huge pyramid, and it just rots, right? Just rots, and then the seeds go through all the process, and then eventually get. And so, if you think about it from a chemical engineering or sustainability point of view, that's just crazy, right? And so, one of the things we've been doing, and I'm sure you guys have tasted cascara tea and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't like Cascara tea. To me, it has this terrible kind of oxidized flavor. And what I realized a couple of years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago now, is that it's because they dry it. And it's the analogy I like to use is like, imagine drinking wine that's been made out of raisins.
Right.
So you dry the grapes, oxidize them, you make raisin wine. It's going to taste a little different, right? So we've been experimenting with fresh Cascara, right? And so we have stuff where you depulp it instead of letting it rot. You immediately put it into a pot of water and boil it, and you extract all the yummy coffee cherry flavors. You extract all the caffeine, and then we add some sugar and some lemon juice, and it makes this fantastic syrup. It's amazing.
Can you share one coffee tip for just a coffee drinker or a consumer? How do you anything there about how you drink your coffee?
Oh, sure. You mean at a general consumer level?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, the number one advice I give that I'm still surprised now that people are surprised by it is like, oh, you should, buy whole beans and grind it right before brewing. It's I give a lot of talks to the general public, and like that blows a lot of people's minds. Like, oh, we shouldn't buy pre-ground.
So this is truly a lightning round around you and your preferences. We call it the U3 top 3. So number 1, your favorite brewing method.
Weekdays, I use a prototype drip commercial, or not, consumer drip brewer that I got from Revel years ago, and so I've been using that.
Okay,
Yeah.
So question number 2, for consumption, your coffee drink of choice, like is it black, latte, hot, cold, or particular origin or wash?
Black, hot, typically, and the washed versus natural or whatever, like it depends on the mood and what the coffee is. Right?
Yep.
So
That's fair.
if I'm on deadline, I have a grant due the next morning or whatever. It's 2 a.m. I want the darkest, blackest, most bitter. Make me feel like I'm back in grad school,
Make you
But on
focus,
weekends,
make you focus.
yeah, weekends I like to try the more fruity stuff in the morning. So.
Yeah. No, that all is good. Number 3, how many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
I often joke that there's too much blood in my caffeine stream, and so it's just nonstop drinking. So,
I'm going to start using that, Bill. I'm going to start using that phrase.
yeah. Usually it takes people half a beat before they get it. I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about actual cups, like the U.S. unit of volume, probably 7 or 8.
Okay.
But,
at least for you, Bill, you can always be saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can always be saying I'm doing it for science. I think that's like the
Yeah. I don't have that though.
Right. Yeah.
I have actually one more question before we go, but I heard that you are also a fan of single malt scotch or bourbon or something like that. First of all, I'm a huge bourbon drinker.
Cool.
What are the intersections with coffee? And like really in appreciation of, beverages, I guess I'll say.
What are the intersections? Well, we had a very literal intersection. A few months ago, we had a outreach event at a local whiskey bar focusing on Irish coffee. So we had different types of coffee that we all served with the same, I think it was Jameson's whiskey. And it was amazing how much the Irish, if you don't know, Irish coffee is black coffee, sugar, whiskey, and then with cream on top. And so we made several different types, had a bunch of people judge, and it was amazing seeing how a natural, kind of a very fruity, kind of raspberry, kind of strawberry forward Ethiopian, how that really changed the flavor of the coffee compared to kind of the standard kind of more dark roasty type of coffee. And so we that's the cool thing about being a director of coffee center is I get invited to do things like that every once in a while. And so literally combine 2 of my favorite beverages together in one event.
Yeah, me too. I want to be invited to that.
Yeah, me too. Bill, thanks so much. This has been an amazing talk to hear about what you're up to, and we just want to point listeners to where they can find out more about the UC Davis Coffee Center and you and your research. So what's the best place for people to find out?
Sure. So for all the sciencey stuff here on campus, there's coffeecenter.ucdavis.edu. So Coffee Center, all one word, so you can find that. If you just Google Coffee Center UC Davis, you'll find it. We mentioned Roast Pick earlier, so that's www.roastpick.com. That's roast, then PIC, all one word.com. And there you can find what we hope will be a new way of helping bring more science and more quantitative rigor to the entire coffee supply chain.
Well, and also you mentioned before about raising funds, and you said send an email to you. Do you want to share your email or some other place where they can go if somebody wants to donate to the center?
If you go onto the Coffee Center website, you'll find all of the contact info for the staff who can answer questions more quickly. And so that's probably the best thing to do.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Bill. We appreciate your time and absolutely love your story. So I can't wait to get out there, and I know we have a lot to talk about and continue that conversation. So thank you again.
No, thank you, Christy. Thank you, Greg. And it's fun to have passionate people asking all these questions about coffee. I love it.
Well, thank you so much to our followers. Of course, we want to hear from you. You can always reach out to us at connect@u3coffee.com or just in the comments wherever you're watching or listening with guest recommendations, your own coffee tips, tricks, and what you're drinking.
And again, that's connect@u3coffee.com or head to the letter U, the number 3, coffee.com, where you can learn more and connect and explore the wonderful world of coffee. We'll see you next time.